It was one of the boldest moves in Cold War intelligence, executed with surgical precision and ruthless calculation. Mossad didn't just intercept a defector. They took a high-ranking KGB interrogator out of the hands of the CIA and the KGB, right in the middle of a three-way intelligence standoff in Yugoslavia. And they did it without firing a single shot. The target, Mikhail Petrov, a name that didn't mean much to the public, but within intelligence circles it carried weight. Petrov wasn't just a Soviet official.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
He was a psychological operator trained to break agents mentally, emotionally, methodically. Over the years, he had extracted information from captured Israeli operatives, information that compromised operations, exposed networks, and damaged Mossad's long-term positioning. So when word got out that Petrov was preparing to defect in Belgrade, it triggered alarms. The CIA moved first. They saw an opportunity, flip a high-level KGB interrogator and gather rare insights into Soviet methods, structure, and strategy. Standard Cold War procedure: recruit, extract, debrief, redeploy the intel. It would have been a major win for the US. But for Mossad, this wasn't about winning the spy game. It was about limiting damage. The risk of letting Petrov land in American custody wasn't theoretical, it was existential. If he started talking about Israeli prisoners, the secrets they gave up, the operations those secrets touched, it could unravel years of Israeli intelligence work. Even worse, the CIA might not fully grasp the danger, or they might choose not to share it. That couldn't happen. Mossad made the call. Petrov could not be allowed to defect to the United States, and they wouldn't waste time negotiating with Washington or debating over intelligence boundaries. This was a mission of containment and retribution. Belgrade was a hornet's nest. CIA operatives had eyes on Petrov. KGB agents were watching from the shadows, still hoping to either snatch him back or silence him permanently. Mossad entered the scene with one goal: remove the variable. Their operatives carried out detailed reconnaissance of Kelmegdan Park, the area where Petrov often walked. They studied the timing, the routes, the gaps in surveillance. When the moment came, they acted. Petrov thought he was being met by a CIA contact. Instead, he was intercepted by Mossad. Within minutes, he was extracted from the park, placed in a secure vehicle, and transported out of Belgrade through a covert route that had been mapped and tested in advance. The CIA didn't even know he was gone until the operation was already complete. Petrov never made it to American hands. He was flown to Israel. There, the second phase began. The goal wasn't to punish him. It was to extract everything he knew about Soviet interrogation techniques, about Israeli agents who had been captured, about the vulnerabilities they exposed, and the operational damage that followed. Mossad debriefed Petrov not just as a defector but as a mirror to their own failures. What had their operatives revealed? Which covers had been blown? Which strategies had been compromised? Petrov answered all of it. He gave detailed accounts of how Israeli prisoners had been interrogated, what methods worked, what resistance tactics failed, and how long it took for key information to come out. Mossad used that information to conduct a full damage assessment. They tracked every compromised thread back to its source, every leak, every vulnerability. Petrov didn't just hand over Soviet techniques, he helped expose the gaps in Israeli operational doctrine. Training protocols were rewritten. Resistance techniques were overhauled. Future agents would go into the field with a far better understanding of what they might face if captured and how to resist it. Petrov's knowledge became a blueprint for preventing future losses. But make no mistake, he wasn't rewarded for his cooperation. Once his information was extracted, Petrov vanished. No public record, no deal, no retirement under a new name. He was a tool. Once that tool had been used, it was removed from circulation. Back in Washington, the CIA was furious. They had been preparing to bring Petrov in, debrief him, gather critical Soviet intel. It wasn't just about losing a defector, it was about losing a strategic opportunity, and worse, losing it to an ally. Mossad had operated without notice, without approval, and without regard for American plans. It was a violation of trust, plain and simple. And yet Israel didn't flinch. There were no apologies, no denials, no quiet phone calls offering explanations. Mossad stood by its decision. From their perspective, Petrov represented an active and ongoing threat. The CIA might have wanted to pick his brain about Soviet power structures, but Israel needed to know what he already knew about them. Letting him slip away wasn't an option. The diplomatic fallout was significant, but mostly behind the scenes. Intelligence sharing between the US and Israel took a hit. Suspicion crept into briefings. The lesson was absorbed across every Western agency. Alliances come second to survival, and Mossad had just demonstrated what that looked like in real time. The Petrov operation also served as a wake-up call for intelligence communities worldwide. Agencies began re-evaluating defector protocols. Internal security measures were upgraded. The risk of asset interception by allies became a legitimate concern, and the ethics of unilateral action in a multilateral space became an open question. What do you do when your ally's target is your own threat? How far are you allowed to go? Mossad had provided an answer: as far as necessary. They weren't reckless, they were precise, and they got results. In the years that followed, the Belgrade operation became something of a case study, not in textbooks or public lectures but in classified training sessions, whispered conversations, and secure briefings. It was proof that even in the shadows, even when operating side by side with friends, the only line that matters is the one that protects your national interest. And that's what makes this story so unforgettable. It wasn't about global ideology or Cold War alliances. It was about survival. About one agency's decision to act alone, without hesitation, to neutralize a threat before it became a disaster, and to do it with such speed and precision that two of the world's most powerful intelligence services couldn't stop it. The CIA never got Petrov, the KGB never saw him again, and Mossad, they walked away with answers, clarity, and a legacy of control. If you made it this far, you already know this wasn't just another spy story. It was a silent war behind the Cold War, one that changed the game without making a sound. Hit the like button if you're as stunned as we are by how far Mossad went to protect their secrets. Share this with someone who still thinks the world of espionage has rules. Drop a comment: was Mossad justified, or did they push the boundaries too far? And hit subscribe if you want more deep dives into the operations they don't teach in history class. There's always another secret to uncover. There's something chilling about a mission pulled off so flawlessly, no one outside the intelligence world even knew it happened. No press, no protests, no photos, just a man, Mikhail Petrov, who was on the verge of flipping the Cold War chessboard, suddenly gone. No explosion, no chase through the streets, just gone. And for the CIA, that disappearance wasn't just a tactical loss, it was a gut punch. They weren't dealing with an amateur service. They knew Mossad was skilled, sharp, and deadly when necessary, but what they underestimated was the depth of Israel's resolve. This wasn't about stealing glory or flexing capability. Mossad wasn't out to embarrass the CIA. They were out to protect their own. Because let's be honest, Petrov wasn't just a Soviet defector, he was a walking security breach. A man who had personally interrogated Israeli agents, learned their habits, their codes, their weaknesses. He didn't just hold Soviet secrets, he held Israeli pain. And Mossad knew better than anyone what damage he could do in the wrong hands, even if those hands belonged to an ally. So they made the call: take him before the CIA does, not because they didn't trust the Americans, but because trust doesn't matter when your national security is on the line. Petrov wasn't just an intelligence asset, he was unfinished business. Every Israeli operative who sat across from him in a Soviet cell represented a risk. Every word extracted under pressure, real names, safe houses, mission details, was a potential crack in the armor of Israeli security. And Mossad wasn't about to let that walk into another country's briefing room without oversight. The operation was built on meticulous surveillance. Kalemegdan Park was mapped out down to the angles of public benches and the blind spots between lampposts. Mossad watched for days, weeks, observing not just Petrov but the CIA tailing him and the KGB still trying to track him down. They weren't playing a guessing game, they were orchestrating timing. Waiting for just the right moment when surveillance dipped, when Petrov's routine was predictable, when the CIA was looking one way and they could move the other. When that moment came, it was over in minutes. Petrov was snatched mid-transition, thinking he was on his way to safety. He likely believed he was about to be debriefed by the CIA, that he was trading one side of the Iron Curtain for the other. He didn't realize he was being redirected to a third party, one that had a very personal stake in his story. Mossad didn't parade him, they didn't make a political statement. They flew him to Israel quietly and efficiently and sat him down for debriefing. But this wasn't a negotiation. Petrov wasn't a guest. He was a liability, a puzzle piece, a data source. He was questioned deeply and strategically about every Israeli operative he had encountered, about the methods used to break them, about what they revealed, about what they couldn't hold onto under pressure. From that, Mossad assembled a full post-mortem. They identified compromised assets, missions that needed to be shut down or rebuilt from scratch, training programs that had to evolve based on real-world breakdowns, because now they knew exactly what tactics the KGB had used and which ones had worked. This wasn't theory, this was raw data from the man who designed the breaking points. Petrov revealed how long agents held out when they faltered, what language they slipped into under stress, how KGB officers manipulated fear and hope in rotation to break psychological resistance. He exposed which safe houses were already blown, which communication methods were outdated, which agents couldn't go back into the field not safely. That level of intel is rarely obtained after a mission is over. But with Petrov, Mossad got to reverse engineer their own failures and rebuild for the future. He handed over everything. But Mossad didn't stop at debriefing. They transformed. Operational security procedures were rewritten. Resistance training became more psychologically informed. Future agents weren't just taught how to resist interrogation, they were taught what specific mental games to expect from KGB-style tactics because now they knew. It was an intelligence windfall, but one that came with diplomatic costs. The CIA wasn't just angry, they were blindsided. Their man was gone, their operation was compromised. They were left scrambling to explain how a defector under their eye had vanished without a trace. And when they found out it was Mossad, that cut deeper than if it had been the KGB. Because when a rival beats you to an asset, it's a race lost. But when an ally does it behind your back, it's a breach of trust, a reminder that cooperation has limits. From that moment, things changed. Yes, the US and Israel remained partners. Yes, joint operations continued, but intelligence sharing cooled. Briefings became more careful, more filtered. No one wanted another Belgrade. The silent message had been received loud and clear: Israel will do what it has to, and that includes working without you. In Mossad, they never looked back. No apology, no clarification, just results. They had stopped a potential disaster, gathered invaluable intelligence, and avoided public exposure. For them, it was a clean operation, one that demonstrated their precision, their reach, and their readiness to act in defense of Israeli interests above all else. Petrov, meanwhile, vanished. No extradition, no trials, no quiet defection, just gone. What happened to him after the debriefing is still classified. Maybe he was held indefinitely, maybe he was given a new identity, maybe he was removed entirely, but what's certain is that he was never allowed to walk free with what he knew. That door closed the moment Mossad touched down with him in Tel Aviv. The incident became legend within intelligence circles. It's the kind of operation that gets referenced in training exercises, not just for the planning but for the psychology, for what it revealed about the balance of power even among allies. About how quickly those relationships can shift when one agency's asset becomes another's threat. Mossad had operated on a principle that rattled everyone: cooperation ends where danger to our own begins. That doctrine echoed in the years that followed. Petrov wasn't the last defector, but after him, handling protocols changed. Agencies began guarding their assets even more tightly, not just from rivals but from friends, because once a man like Petrov shows up, every agency wants him, and if they can't have him, they'll move to make sure no one else does. So while the public heard nothing, the intelligence community walked away from Belgrade with a new understanding. Trust is useful until it is. Agreements are sacred until someone decides security matters more. And in the silence that followed, Mossad's legacy only grew. They didn't talk about it, they didn't leak it, they didn't need to. They had pulled off an operation so clean it didn't leave a trail. They had stolen a ghost, stripped him for truth, and erased him while two superpowers watched from the sidelines. What happened in Belgrade didn't just change the game, it exposed how the game was always being played. To the outside world, alliances were solid, NATO was united, the West was organized. But beneath that polished diplomatic surface was a battlefield of silent competition. The Mossad operation to kidnap Mikhail Petrov didn't just confirm that, it broadcasted it to every intelligence agency that had ears to the ground. And let's be clear, this wasn't recklessness, it wasn't showboating, it was cold, calculated necessity. Israel didn't have the luxury of playing by the rules when those rules left their agents exposed. Petrov had seen their faces, heard their confessions, listened to the cracks in their resolve when isolation and exhaustion stripped them down to their weakest selves. He knew their names, he knew what they gave up. If that ended up in the CIA's hands, even accidentally, it could unravel everything. Not because the CIA would intentionally harm Israel, but because in a world of interagency cooperation, shared intelligence doesn't stop with one partner. It gets analyzed, summarized, passed along, and suddenly, highly sensitive Israeli vulnerabilities could be sitting in a NATO intelligence database accessible to multiple nations. So Mossad did what no other agency dared: they cut the line. They didn't wait for a signal, they didn't ask for clearance, they moved fast, efficient, and unapologetic. Petrov had been watched by the CIA, tracked carefully, managed quietly. But Mossad identified the one moment of exposure, the one sliver of opportunity, and acted before anyone else even realized the clock had started ticking. He was there, and then he was. The fact that they pulled this off in Belgrade, a city buzzing with operatives from all sides, only made the feat more impressive. The KGB wanted him silenced. The CIA wanted him secured. Mossad got to him first and, more importantly, cleanly. That precision sent shockwaves through the intelligence world. And then came the silence. No denials, no public fallout, no confrontation at the UN. Just one angry agency, one satisfied one, and one vanished man. The CIA's frustration never made headlines, but behind closed doors, it was thunderous. Months of work, delicate planning, diplomatic risk, all of it evaporated. And the message from Israel, crystal clear. When your asset becomes our liability, we will act, period. That kind of boldness, that refusal to wait for permission, changed how intelligence cooperation worked moving forward. Trust was fractured. Agencies became more guarded. Defector operations became more tightly controlled. Everyone started looking over their shoulder, not just for enemies but for friends who might intervene if their interests were threatened. Mossad's move exposed the limits of partnership, that no matter how close agencies appear, their priorities will always diverge when the stakes are high enough. It didn't end the alliance between Israel and the US, but it redefined it. And what about Petrov? He gave Mossad everything: detailed accounts of Soviet interrogation methods, a list of broken Israeli agents, the timing of their confessions, the operations that were burned. He was a one-man damage report, and once Mossad had what they needed, he disappeared completely. His fate remained sealed behind classified walls. And maybe that's what makes the operation so haunting. There was no victory lap, no trophies, just a quiet ripple through the halls of power, a reminder that intelligence isn't about who makes the loudest moves, it's about who moves first. Mossad didn't just steal a defector. They rewrote the rules, showed the world what it means to act without hesitation, and walked away without a word. If that shook you, hit like. Share this with someone who thinks intelligence agencies always play on the same team. Drop a comment: would you have made the same call Mossad did? And subscribe for more stories from the shadow world, where the silence always says more than the headlines.